Hi class, this will be our last sharing session. We are going to share about the ethics and code of professional conduct. As we know, the Registration of Engineer Acts is the Bible for all the engineer. Registration of Engineer Act or REA is the step to equip the engineers for the professional ethics, which is useful for our professional life. If we stop to take the professional ethics as our guardian during our working life, it's just like we dig the treasure towards the treasure until in front of it, then we give up last minute. What is Registration of Engineers Act? Registration of Engineers Act 1967 actually is the Act of Parliament. It is first enacted as Act 66 of 1967. Is the regulation governing the engineering profession, practice and services. REA or the Registration of Engineers Act is enabling through Board of Engineers Malaysia. Registration of Engineers Act 1967 and the revision in 2007, we call it as REA. REA is an act to provide for the registration of engineers and sole proprietorships, partnerships, and bodies corporate providing professional engineering services and for the purposes connected therewith. So this is the table show the history of the act. 1967, the Registration of Engineers Act 1967 was enacted. The Registration of Engineers Regulation 1972 was enacted. The date of operation is 1972. In 1990, the Registration of Engineers Regulations 1990 was enacted. The date of operation is 1990. In year 2003, it being revised to the Registration of Engineers Regulations 1990s. The date of operation is 10th of November 2003. Okay, what is ethics? Ethics actually is the major branch of philosophy. It encompassing proper conduct and good living. It is synonym for the morally correct or justified. It's a set of justified moral principles of obligation, rights, and idea. Issue of ethics arise because of the specialist knowledge of the professional and how the use of this knowledge shall be governed when providing a service to the public. For example, an engineer is possesses the specialist knowledge and training. When a client engages an engineer to carry out the professional job, it means that the client places trust in the engineer that the service provided will be to the client's best interest. As such, the engineer must not use the specialist knowledge and training to exploit the client. For example, incorporating overly high factor of safety in his design. As we know, as a professional engineer with the professional ethics, we have to carry out our design work, comply to the code and also the proposed factor of safety. But at the same time, we also need to take care the interests of the client to make sure the design is cost effective. Okay, what is the conduct of professional code of professional conduct? Code of professional conduct is a set of internally enforced rules or regulations that members of a profession must follow. The main intention is to ensure public safety, prevent exploitation of the client, and also to preserve the integrity of the profession. Code of professional conduct may or may not have the same status as a law. We need to remember that Code of professional conduct is not law. It's just a guideline. Code of professional conduct, as set out in Part 4 of the regulations, is an integral part of the Registration of Engineers Act. Okay, now let us go through some of the regulation inside the Registration of Engineers Act. For the regulation number 23 is about conduct of registered engineer. Every registered engineer shall at all times uphold the dignity, high standing, and reputation of his profession. Means that all the registered engineer must act professionally. Regulation number 24, responsibility to employer, client, or profession. A registered engineer in his responsibility to his employer, client, or the profession shall have full regard to the public interest. Again, this reminds the registered engineer shall act professionally. For the regulation number 25 is on the discharge of duty. A registered engineer shall discharge his duty to his employer or the client as the case may be with complete fidelity. Except with the permission of his employer, a registered engineer shall not accept any remuneration for services rendered other than from his employer. Means a registered engineer can only receive the salary, allowance, bonus, and so on from the employer. But if you want to receive any remuneration from other party, he need to get a consent from his employer. Under the regulation number 26, it mentioned the reputation and etc. of a registered engineer shall not to be injured. A registered engineer shall not maliciously injure or attempt to maliciously injure, whether directly or indirectly, the professional reputation, prospects, or business of any other registered engineers. That means we cannot simply sabotage other registered engineer. For this regulation number 27, we talk about the canvassing and the advertising for the engineer is prohibited. A registered engineer shall not canvass or solicit professional employment. A registered engineer also shall not offer to make by way of commission or any other payment for the introduction of his professional employment. Besides, a registered engineer shall not, except with the permitted by the board, advertise in any manner or form in connection with his profession. Means engineer is not allowed to do any advertisement or publicity unless they get the consent from PM. Also, a registered engineer shall not provide professional engineer service to any person unless the scope of such services are clearly defined in a written agreement between both parties. Actually, this clause is to protect the registered engineer. For the regulation number 28, a registered engineer in an engineering consultancy practice or consultant firm shall not practice engineering with any person whose registration has been cancelled. That means as a registered engineer, we shall not work in a consultant firm which the director's professional license already been cancelled. Under the regulation number 29, restriction on making payment or placing contract. A registered engineer in an engineering consultancy practice shall not be a medium of payment made on his client's behalf unless he so requests accepted by the client, nor shall he, in connected with work on which he is employed, place contract or orders except with the authority of and on behalf of his client. Means that engineer we are not allowed to make payment or place contract without unless we are with the consent from the client. For this regulation number 13, which related to the restriction on entering the professional partnership being deleted in year 2003. For the regulation number 31 is on registered engineer is not allowed to intervene or take over the work of another, which means that a registered engineer shall not directly or indirectly supplant or attempt to supplant another registered engineer. A registered engineer shall not intervene or attempt to intervene in or in connection with engineering work of any kind which to his knowledge has already been entrusted to another registered engineer, or take over any work of that other registered engineer acting for the same client, unless he obtain the consent of that other registered engineer or being formally notified by the client that the services of the other registered engineer have been terminated. Means a registered engineer cannot simply take over other engineers' job unless with two conditions. The first condition is the original engineers already write a letter withdraw from the project. The second condition is the engineer get the letter from the client mentioned that they already terminate the original engineer in the proper way. For the regulation number 32, restriction on being a director, member or shareholder of contracting and manufacturing company. Okay, except with the prior approval of the Board of Engineers Malaysia, a registered engineer in an engineering consultancy practice shall not be a director or executive of or substantial shareholder in or agent for any contracting or manufacturing company or firm or business related to building or engineering. It means that if you are a director for a consultant firm, you are not supposed at the same time become the director or executive for any contracting or manufacturing company with a business related to building or engineering. If such approval is given by the Board of Engineers Malaysia, such registered engineer shall not undertake any contract work wherein he is engaged to provide professional engineering service in such project unless it is in respect of a design and build project. It means that if you are director for a consultant firm and at the same time you already obtained the consent from Board of Engineers Malaysia which allow you to become the director for a manufacturing company, it is okay. But you must remember that we cannot this engineer cannot undertake any contract work for a project which he is a consultant. Unless the project is designed and built, that is no problem for him. Regulation number 33 is on disclosure of interest. Every registered engineer while acting in his professional capacity shall disclose in writing to his client of the fact if he is a director, member, substantial shareholder in or agent for any contracting manufacturing company, firm business or has any financial interest in any such company, firm, business with which he deal on behalf of his client. Okay, so this is the circular number 3 in year 2005. Under Circular 3/2005 guidelines, a registered engineer shall at all times hold paramount the safety, health and welfare of the public. Besides, a registered engineer shall undertake assignments only if he is qualified by education and experience in the specific technical fields in which he is involved. For example, a civil engineer, we cannot take the job for mechanical or electrical which we got no knowledge and experience for it, because actually this is dangerous to the public. Number 3, a registered engineer shall issue public statement only in the objective and truthful manner. Means if a registered engineer want to issue any public statement, he need to make sure that the statement being written in the professional and neutral way. Number 4, a registered engineer shall act for each employer or client as faithful agent or trustee. Again, this remind the registered engineer shall act professionally to the employer or client. Number 5, a registered engineer shall conduct himself honorably, responsibly, ethically and lawfully so as to enhance the honor, reputation and usefulness of the profession. Okay, there are some do's and don'ts for young engineer. The brief introduction to Code of Ethics for Young Engineer. The Board of Engineers Malaysia has from time to time received inquiry and complaint from public about the conduct of engineers in relation to the Registration of Engineers Act. BM has therefore produced the guideline herein that outline the conduct expected of engineers. These guidelines are set out under a number of broad area relating to the engineering profession. Okay, so for the registration, under the Registration of Engineers Act 1967, the Act 138 and subsequent amendments, the most recent being year 2002, is a requirement of the law that any person providing engineering service be a qualified person and registered with the Board of Engineers Malaysia. These requirements extend to foreigners who are required to seek registration as temporary engineers. The do and don'ts is below related to the requirement of this Act. What is the do's? An engineering graduate with accredited engineering degree must register with the Board of Engineers to take up employment as an engineer. So remember, after you graduate from UiTM, you need to immediately register with the Board of Engineers after you get your degree. Then what is the don'ts? An engineer shall not be the submitting person for design beyond his or her area of competency. For example, if you are a civil engineer, you cannot sign any submission drawing for mechanical or electrical. An engineer shall not endorse his PE stamp and sign on report or plans not prepared by him. Means that engineer need to ensure that the plan he endorsed on is under his own work or by his own staff, and at the same time he already go through and agree with. Okay. Besides, an engineer shall not enter into partnership with any party not permitted under Engineers Act. It means that as an engineer, after you get your professional title, you cannot or you are not allowed to form a consultant firm together with another engineer who the professional title already been cancelled or suspended. An engineering consultancy service shall not provide professional service in any branch of engineering where none of its directors are registered to practice in that branch of engineering. It means that if you got a consultant firm named Perunting ABC, inside this Perunting ABC got 3 directors. If none of the director with the profession for the electrical, then that means the company not supposed to practice or get the job on the electrical aspect. An engineer must not practice in the branch of engineering he is not registered in. Again, this remind engineers that if you are a civil engineer, please don't practice in the branch of mechanical, electrical, or etc. For consultancy, in the Registration of Engineers Act 1967, provision is included for the registration of accredited checker and the requirement of continuing professional development (CPD) beginning year 2005. Means after year 2005, all the professional engineer they need to carry out the CPD program to ensure that every year they can obtain minimum 25 CPD for the professional engineer without practicing certificate, and for the professional engineer with the practicing certificate they need to accumulate 50 CPD per year for them to renew their annual license. Okay, maybe some of us will feel that why we need to equip ourselves with all these professional ethics knowledge now and not later, because actually knowledge is important as a weapon for us to fight towards successful. But we need to remember one point: no matter how much knowledge you gain or how many resources you got, if you don't know how to use it effectively, the knowledge and the resources will never enough. Just like the man inside this picture, actually he got a lot of stacked ladders which can help him to climb over the wall, but he don't know how to use the resources effectively. As such, he still end up stay at the same condition. So as an engineer, we need to equip ourselves with all the knowledge, and we also need to know how to use the knowledge effectively to help us march towards the successful path effectively. Thank you.